Paul is a camp counselor, and he works every summer for 5 weeks at a camp for kids. And one night, Paul and his friend decide to take a little night hike to get away from the kids for a little while. And they only hiked about a quarter of a mile, and they found a patch of grass, so they both lay down in the patch of grass and were just staring up at the stars. And as he and his friend are laying there, he hears the most beautiful sound of running water. Paul says it was like he'd never heard running water before. It never sounded so beautiful. He said all that he could imagine was this crisp, clean, clear water trickling over the rocks. And he got this image stuck in his head and then had this sudden urge to go find it. And not just an urge to go find it, but a need to go find it. He needed to find that creek. Now, behind them was dense forest and brush. So it would have been pretty hard to find at night, but it sounded like it was pretty close. So Paul looks at his friend and he can tell his friend is having the exact same thought that he is. So he thinks to himself, okay, let's just wait here for like 5 minutes and then see if I still think it's a good idea to go looking for this creek. And Paul says it felt like there was some kind of playful presence that was urging him to go find this running water. So he decides, yes, this is a good idea. And he stands up and his friend stands up with him and off they both go without saying a word to each other to go find this creek. So as Paul and his friend are going toward the sound, they notice the sound getting quieter and quieter. So they both stop, not knowing if they really want to go any further. And as they stood there kind of debating, the noise starts getting louder and louder until it sounds like they're standing next to a river. At which point, Paul says to his friend, let's come back and find it tomorrow. And they both agree that that's probably a good idea. But as soon as they made that decision, both the sound of the water and the urge to go find the water both completely disappeared. All they could hear was silence. But the presence that Paul said that he felt now felt like a sinister presence. And that feeling just started in the pit of his stomach and just kind of radiated out until it encompassed the rest of him. So Paul and his friend take off and they start walking back to camp rather quickly. And once they get there, they actually start talking about what it is that had just happened. And his friend says that he had the exact same urge to go find the water and the exact same internal battle to fight that urge to go find it. And it wasn't until they got back that they realized it was kind of like a trance, like a fog had been lifted. And what they had just experienced was not normal. It was like that urge had been placed there by something else. Because once the sound of the water stopped, the urge stopped. So the next morning, Paul and his friend go back to that spot to see if they could find the water, and they can't. They can't find any water anywhere near where they had been the night before. And they looked at some maps, and according to the maps, there wasn't any creeks or rivers anywhere near them. To this day, Paul says he is scared to imagine what would have happened had they continued looking for that creek. And what's really eerie is that he and his friend had the same thoughts and the same feelings at the same time without saying a word to one another. But in the end, he's grateful that they both made the decision to go back to the relative safety of their camp and leave whatever was out in the woods, out in the woods.